Welcome to this deep dive into the life and crimes of Robert Lee Yates, one of America's most notorious serial killers. Yates was a seemingly ordinary family man, a former military helicopter pilot and father of 5 children. However, beneath the facade of respectability lay a man capable of horrific acts of violence. In today's video, we will explore the dark story of Robert Lee Yates, the tragic lives he destroyed. Born on May 27, 1952, in Spokane, Washington, Robert Lee Yates appeared to have a fairly typical upbringing. Raised in a Christian household, Yates was known to be soft-spoken and polite. He showed an early interest in the military, a passion that would later shape much of his adult life. After high school, Yates attended Walla Walla Community College. But it was his career in the military that truly defined him. Yates joined the U.S. Army in 1975 and trained to become a helicopter pilot. His military career took him to various parts of the world, including Germany and Somalia, where he served honorably. Over the course of his military service, he earned several commendations, including a Meritorious Service Medal. To those who knew him, Yates appeared to be a disciplined, devoted soldier and family man. However, behind the scenes, there were troubling signs. Yates began to exhibit controlling behavior toward his wife and children, and some say he struggled to adjust to civilian life after leaving the military in 1996. In the early 1990s, just as Yates' military career was winding down, a series of gruesome murders began to surface in Spokane. These crimes targeted vulnerable women, many of whom were involved in sex work. Yates' victims were often found in rural or remote locations, their bodies discarded without much care, suggesting that the killer had no respect for their lives. Between 1996 and 1998, the bodies of 13 women were found dumped across the Spokane area. Most of these women were shot in the head with a small-caliber handgun, and some were sexually assaulted before or after their death. The murders created fear and panic throughout the community, and police scrambled to find leads. What no one suspected was that the killer was none other than Robert Lee Yates, a man who lived in the same community, blending into society. With a seemingly normal family life, Yates had a specific pattern when it came to selecting his victims. He would pick up women, often sex workers, in his van, sometimes offering them money. Once inside, they had no idea they were in the clutches of a man who had killed before and would kill again. Yates would drive them to a remote area, where he would shoot them in the head, leaving their bodies in isolated places where they would often remain undiscovered for days or even weeks. What made Yates particularly terrifying was his ability to compartmentalize his life. On one hand, he was a family man, attending church, spending time with his children, and maintaining his home. On the other, he was a cold-blooded killer, preying on society's most vulnerable. Yates' military background may have helped him in his crimes, as he was methodical in how he carried them out. Leaving little evidence for authorities to follow, he was careful not to leave DNA behind, and his military experience gave him the skills to remain calm under pressure. The community began to fear for their safety. The media dubbed the unknown killer the Spokane serial killer, and local women were warned to stay alert, especially those working in the sex industry. Many felt the police weren't doing enough, and the case remained unsolved for years. During this time, Yates continued living his double life. He was still a father and husband, but his dark urges never subsided. The murders became more frequent, and the methods were consistent: a gunshot to the head, and a hasty burial or abandonment of the body. Yet, Yates managed to stay one step ahead of the police. By the late 1990s, investigators were under increasing pressure to solve the case. After several dead ends, a major breakthrough finally came in 2000, when police were able to link DNA from one of the murder scenes to Yates through his military service records. In April of that year, he was arrested. During questioning, Yates initially denied any involvement, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. DNA, bullet casings, and witness statements all pointed toward Yates being the Spokane serial killer. Faced with the weight of evidence, Yates eventually confessed to killing at least 13 women. However, many believed the true number of his victims could be much higher, as there were other unsolved murders that fit his modus operandi. Yates' confession provided some closure for the families of the victims, but it also raised chilling questions about how such a seemingly average man could commit such heinous crimes for so long without being caught. Robert Lee Yates' trial was one of the most anticipated in Spokane's history. The community had been terrorized by his crimes for years, and the families of the victims were desperate for justice. During the trial, Yates showed little remorse for his actions. and his stoic demeanor only added to the chilling nature of the proceedings. In 2002, Yates was sentenced to death for his crimes. The court found that his actions were premeditated and calculated, and his brutal killing spree had terrorized an entire community. Yates, however, appealed his conviction multiple times, and his case was subject to years of legal wrangling. As of today, Yates remains on death row, where he is one of the most notorious inmates in Washington State's prison system. He has continued to appeal his death sentence, but for the families of his victims, justice was served when he was convicted of these monstrous crimes. The story of Robert Lee Yates is a disturbing one. How could a man with a respectable military career, a loving family, and a normal life turn into one of America's most prolific serial killers? The answer may lie in the dark recesses of Yates' mind, where violent tendencies festered and grew unchecked for years. Yates represents the frightening reality that killers don't always fit the stereotypes we expect. He wasn't the isolated loner or the social outcast. Instead, he was a man who lived in plain sight, using his family life and military experience as a cover for his dark desires. Robert Lee Yates' story is a grim reminder of the potential for evil that can hide behind even the most ordinary facade. While his crimes shocked the nation and left a trail of heartbreak and horror, they also led to greater awareness of the vulnerabilities that predators exploit in society. Today, Yates sits on death row, awaiting the final judgment for his actions. His victims will never be forgotten, and their families continue to grieve the loss of their loved ones. Thank you for watching, and remember to stay vigilant and aware. The truth, as we've seen today, can be far more terrifying than fiction.